I've just finished reading Björn Borg's biography. I, however, have no idea who Björn Borg is. The 6-time Wimbledon champion and King of Cool has written a book which quite frankly infuriated me. The 11-time Grand Slam champion promises so much yet delivers so little in terms of detail and reflection. Björn Borg, more like Björn Boring. In this video, I'll discuss some of the very few topics he goes into detail on and give you my honest thoughts on the book. So when reading this book, although I felt like I might perish through lack of stimulation, Björn Borg actually tells of a couple of near-death experiences in this book. During the first of these, Björn Borg actually crashes his car in Svardsjö in Sweden at a bend which is now known as Björn Borg's Bend. He writes, "I must have blacked out because when I opened my eyes I was hanging upside down in my seatbelt." So he goes and knocks on the door of a nearby house, the owners of which must have felt like they'd just been transported to another planet with the most famous man in Sweden just standing on their doorstep. Borg's saviours call an ambulance and the hospital determine that Borg suffers nothing more than an injured thumb. Oh yeah, and a car looking like a crushed can of Coke. Another time in the 1970s, when in Israel for a tournament, Borg and Vitas Gerulaitis actually got talking to some Israeli soldiers, who then asked them to put their uniforms on and pose for photos. And forgetting their huge profile and fame, they just said yes, like you do. Someone cropped Vitas out of the photo, gave it to the press, and then would you believe Borg then started receiving death threats. These only stopped when Yasser Arafat asked everyone to leave Borg alone. So although these two stories so far are actually pretty explosive, the stylish Swede actually only devotes about a page to both of them. Both of these stories are actually written quite dryly without much description either. He doesn't really delve into his feelings around these events, and he just doesn't really add any colour to them either. If you're enjoying this video, I've also got upcoming videos about the evolution of the NBA and also the history of African football ahead of AFCON. So if you want to see those videos, please do subscribe. Borg also talks about his excessive use of cocaine and alcohol. In fact, he describes his use of alcohol, cocaine and pills as his favourite form of self-medication. And I was generally struggling to find any interesting prose in this book, but that was actually a pretty evocative moment of writing from Borg. He said he started using drugs to let loose and have a little fun. Evidently, he wasn't on drugs when he was writing this book because it was not fun to read. In 1989, he actually knocks himself out through drugs and is rushed to a hospital. This could have been a dramatic moment in the book, but again, Borg devotes about a paragraph to this. Another thing which wound me up about this book is that Borg just spends so long just talking about, holidays that he went on or what his parents did, and he just doesn't offer any substance to the most kind of poignant moments in the book. There was another time in Holland where his drug use just began to absolutely tear him apart. Once again, he wakes up in a hospital bed. And is this expanded on? What do you think? Of course it isn't. He writes, "My body just gave out," with absolutely no context, by the way. Paragraph break. It's then a few hundred words later that he actually reveals that this was due to drugs, and the lack of detail in this book was just so frustrating to me. So it's quite clear that it was his tennis ability that made him one of the biggest stars in Sweden, rather than his storytelling abilities. Now, on the subject of fame and attention, Borg never ever wanted any of this. He was quite shy and he never had any media training. Now, in this era, the likes of Gerulaitis, Ilie Nastase, Jimmy Connors, they all really loved the spotlight. They loved going out and meeting women, and they really loved the high life. But Borg just hated the spotlight. In fact, Borg says that he actually preferred the US Open to Wimbledon because at the US Open, women actually left him alone. Yeah, imagine all that female attention. Sounds like a nightmare. At the US Open one year, a woman and a boy enter Borg's hotel room claiming to be his mistress and his son. He'd never seen either of them before, and the boy was just shouting, "Papa, Papa." Borg states, "Eventually I'd had enough and asked them to leave." I do quite like their use of the word "eventually" here. It's as if he just sits there for 45 minutes and thinks, well, I've never actually seen either of these two people before in my life, but I may as well just hear them out and just hear what they got to say. And once more, this takes up about 300 words in the book, where really it could have been a whole chapter. And I understand that Borg is quite a private person, but if you don't want to tell these kind of stories, just don't say any of it then. It kind of felt like, do you ever have that scenario where a friend will start telling a story and you'll say like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting, and then what happened? And then they just say, oh no, that was it. And you think, oh great, thanks for just wasting 30 seconds of my life. So that pretty much sums up my thoughts on the book. I just found it quite dull. A great example of what could have been expanded on was his rivalry with John McEnroe. What did it feel like to have the tyrannical McEnroe just piercing you with his gaze from the other side of the court? How was it going against a super brat who everyone in the world basically wanted to lose? And shock horror, he devotes about 3 pages to one of the rivalries which defined an era in tennis. And I've also seen some reviews say that he actually goes really deep into his rivalry with McEnroe. By the way, he definitely doesn't. Another really odd part of the book is the lack of expansion on his coach Lennart Berglund, known as Laba. In the first few chapters, he says that he's got quite a bad temper, which sounds like it's going to set up some pretty dramatic stories. But there's no such thing, and the only mentions we get of him are, he was happy when I won, he was unhappy when I lost. And he kind of like adds this to like so many parts. It's like, well, obviously he's going to be happy that you won. Like, you don't need to keep saying it. And it's just a classic example of just like how robotic and sterile the prose is in this book. So yeah, Björn Borg, I mean, a legendary tennis player, the first true king of clay until Nadal came along. But this book, it just gets a big thumbs down from me. So there you have it. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.